We're up to Daf Kuf Chaf Amid Beis 120b, and we're up to the end of the second line. Ulahach Lishna the Omar Rava Simonim Doraisa. If we're going to go according to the first of the two Lishonos of Rava that maintains that Simonim Doraisa, and the Torah relies on Simonim, is Haduktani. What are we going to do with our Mishnah that says that the Eidim cannot testify unless they saw the Panim and they saw the Padachas, they saw the Metzat, they saw the Chotem? Afal Pishesh Simonim Begufo Bekela. The Mishnah says is outspoken. We don't rely neither on Simonim on his body nor on the Kalim. So the Gemara now is going to go through an entire analysis of what kind of simanim on the guf are unreliable and on his kalim are unreliable. And those are the ones that were being excluded and disqualified in our Mishnah because they don't meet the bar of what qualifies as recognized and reliable siman. Gufo. What was wrong with simanim al gufo in this case? The Aruch, they said that he was very tall, good, or he was very unusually short. So these are simanim beinanim. These are not really top-notch simanim. We can't be mater and Yisrael Sish based on these simanim. These are what you'd call simanim gruin and kalov. Why are these called simanim gruin? The chayshina l'she'ila, because maybe he was borrowing someone else's kalim. So you identified him as Ruvain because these were the kalim of Ruvain, but that body was really not Ruvain. So it was Shimon who had borrowed the kalim of Ruvain. So the Gemara says, chayshina l'she'ila, if you're afraid that maybe the kalim were borrowed, is then chamor b'simoni ukaf echi madrinon. And Rashi tells us that we learned in Elam Etzias regarding Hashavas Aveda that we return a donkey with the simanim of the saddle, meaning that if you prove you own the saddle, then ipso facto you've proven that you own the donkey that is connected with that saddle, but maybe the owner of the donkey had borrowed the saddle. So why are we returning the donkey to the so-called owner based on the simanim of the saddle, the ownership of the saddle? And the Gemara answers, Lo shaile inish ukfa. Here there are two interpretations of the Rishonim. Either it means that a person would not borrow a saddle, and then we read the Gemara, thusly, the Masakev Leila Chamra, because it's going to, so to speak, chew into the back of the chamor and injure the chamor, because it's not custom made. Or the way the Meiri understands it, that the Baal HaChamor would never lend out his saddle. That's one thing you don't lend out, because what's going to happen is it's going to change its shape when it's used on the back of the shoel's donkey, and then when you return it, it will injure the mashil's chamor. The Gemara asks, what about mitzao kashrut bekisu ba'ariki b'tabas? And we said that if the shliach is bringing a get and he drops the get and somebody finds it, we could return the get to the shliach and he'll deliver it to the isha based on the following on the following kalim. If it's usher bekis, the get was tied down to some sort of a pouch, or arniki, some sort of pocketbook where they keep money, or with a signet ring. How can we return the get? Maybe the person who was mashil the kiss to somebody else, and that someone else who's the shoel, he was the one who tied it down to the get. So it means that this get was written for the sake of a different woman. And the shachach hashoel, the shoel himself, forgot vehichselos hakis kosher in my get. It's not his get. Gemara says no. There's certain things you don't lend out. Abbas, you would not lend out because it has a chosim on it. It's a signet ring, and it's used for a stamp on a document that certifies the document is valid and binding. And chayshel is ziyufa. There'll be some sort of a ziyuf over here. What's going to happen is somebody who borrowed that tabas chosem will use the chosem, and then he'll take that document. And let's say the document, for example, will grant him rights to collect monies from the owner who's not around. So he goes to his wife and he shows her, oh, look, you have to give me this object or this amount of money because your husband is signed on it. I have a seal. And Kismi Arniki, the reason why these things are not usually lent out to others is because Menachshi Inch, there's a concept called nichush, because they believe that the mazel of a person is sort of inherent in the kiss and the arniki. So when somebody takes it, he, even if he's just a shoel, he gets benefits from that mazel. So you don't want to give out your mazel. That's like your secret weapon. Below most, and we don't lend it out. Iboy saying another possibility why we don't rely on kalim, simanim of kalim, is bechivari the sumak, the type of simanim bruim that we're talking about second rate is when they determine whether his clothes were white or his clothes were black. Very often, quite common to have these colors. Colors are not a serious siman. The Mishnah says that we cannot testify about the death of a person, even afilu ra'u meguyad. We saw he was literally cut up, but we didn't see him die. So l'meimer, should we assume the meguyad chai, that a person who's meguyad in this way, he'll eventually survive, and we can't be matter his wife. We're a mini, but we have a Mishnah in Masechet Olos regarding Tumas Oel, that Adam eino mitame ad sheteitze nafshe. The corpse of a body has to be a corpse. We have to know 100% sure that he died, and only then is it mitame tumas oel tumas mes. Afilu meguyad. So far, so good. Even if we find a meguyad, then we assume that he might be. That we assume that that he still is alive. He's meguyad, but he's alive. Bafilu goses. Even if, let's say, you came into the OL or you had contact with him when he was a goses, he's in the throes of death, but nevertheless he hasn't died yet, so you're not telling me you don't contract tumor. So the Gemara is now medayik from the lashon of the Mishnah in Olos. The Mishnah says that Adam eino mitame ad sheteitze nafsh. And the emphasis here is on tumah. Timuye lo mitame. The chiddush here in this Mishnah in Olos is that even though ha michya locha, even though he's going to eventually die, this goses or the meguyad, nevertheless, right now he's not mitame. That's the chiddush. So right now we haven't seen him die yet. He's alive, but he will eventually die. The chiddush is he's not mitame, even though he'll eventually die, because right this moment he's not dead yet. And that's a stira to what it says in our Mishnah, that you cannot testify to be mater and each based on a meguyad situation. But here we see that although he's not mitame when he's meguyad, but he will die. That's the implication of the Mishnah. We're going to now study, based on a brisa, a machlokas between Reb Shimon ben Elazar and Rabbanan about the status of Maguya, whether he can survive or he will eventually die. We could testify about a Maguyot, and we could be matter his wife because he will die from this attack. But a person who's been hung up on a tree, that's not for sure that he's going to die. All this is the Rabbanan cheat. We cannot be sure that a Maguyot, says Rav Shimon, is going to die, because it could be that he will experience some sort of refuah. So therefore, Abai is going to say the following, that our Mishnah, which says Ein Me'idin al Maguyot, reflects the sheet of Rav Shimon Elazar. But if you find in the Mishnah in Olos an indication that a Maguyot will definitely die, that reflects the shita of the Rabbanan who say Me'idim al Maguyot. Gemara now asks the following question: is it feasible to attribute the ownership of our Mishnah to Rav Shimon Elazar, and a Maguyot is alive, he's not going to die, or not necessarily going to die? V'aktani Sefer, let's look at the Sefer of our Mishnah. Maisa bi Asya, story to Asya, bi Echad sheshelchu layam. They never threw him into the deep waters of the sea. And lo also biyadam eloraglam, when they looked for his body to identify the dead, they only found one limb, his leg. They couldn't find the rest of his body. And now the question arises: can he survive without that limb? Amru chachamim, it depends. Min harkuva ulamala. If you find the entire leg, even the part above the knee, then he cannot survive without it. And therefore, tinase ishto, we can allow his wife to get married. But if we see that piece of leg, minar kuva ulamata, so it's below the knee, lo tinase, because we're afraid maybe he's still alive. So the fact that he seems to have drowned in the ocean, in the sea, is not proof positive that he died. This is like Mayim Shein Lem Sof, that we say that maybe, he was able to get out of Parsa afterwards, and somehow he got onto the dry land. So the Gemara proves now that if it was a case of Nichtach min Arkuva Ulamala, we're allowed to be matir his wife to get married. We see that Maguyot is not going to live. And this is a stira to the ratio which we've attributed to Rav Shimon Elazar, who holds that he might survive. Here we're saying that if it's min harkuva lamala, then tinase ishto means we know he's going to die. And the Gemara answers, Shani Maya de Marzu Maka. Even though Rav Shimon Elazar holds that Maguyot will not necessarily die, and you cannot testify to be matir's wife, but in the case of a Maguyot in the water, there's a whole new element over here because he was drowning in the water. So even Rav Shimon Elazar is going to concede in this case that a Maguyot will be sofa lamos, because Mayim Marzu Maka, it intensifies the Maka. He writes in the Hebrew, Mechazekes umegadeles es ke'ev hamak. So at this point, the Gemara is able to reconcile the Reish and the Seifa according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So the Gemara asks for Omar Rabba Babrachona Lididi Chazi Liahutaya Tishokil Sap Seira Vigaide Legamla. What about the story of Rabbah who saw a tire that's an Arabic, it's like a guide. He takes care of a large area, make sure that everything goes well. And he took a sword and he chopped into the body of a gamal, of a camel, and the camel let out some sort of a coal of pain and didn't even finish the coal and it died. So you see clearly that a Maguyat is not going to be able to die. It's not going to be able to live, sorry. Omar Abaye, that case of the gamal was chishab. It was a very weak camel. And therefore it died immediately as soon as you made that chetach, that chtach. But Stam Maguyad is not going to die immediately. Maybe he won't even die. Rava Omer, Rava comes back with his own original reconciliation of the contradiction between the Mishnah here and the Mishnah Olos, and he says that our Mishnah that says Ein Me'idiv al Guyad, which means that a Maguyad will or might survive, is Besakin Milu Benes. He was cut by a burning hot knife. B'divrei hakol. Everybody agrees in this case that sofo lichios, that he might really survive, because the burn itself causes refuah. It cauterizes the wound, it stops the bleeding. So we cannot testify about him that he died. Machlokes Rabbanan and Rav Shimon Elazar, whether we could be made on a Maguyad, that's only a Maguyad v'sakin she'eno malu benes. And the Mishnah Olos, which seems to indicate that Maguyad is not going to live, that's talking about a sakin she'eno malu benes. But our Mishnah that says you cannot testify to Maguyad, it's talking about a Maguyad v'sakin milu benes. Omar Rabbi Yehuda Omar Shmuel, Lo Shanu, the Mishnah that says in the case of Chayo Cheles, we're not going to testify Ben Amay will survive. Ella, that's only Mimakum Shei Nafshel Yotze. If the animal attacked the human being on that part of his body, which is not a matter of life and death, Avom Mimakum Shei Nafshel Yotze Me'iden. If the animal attacked that place in the human body where he can't survive without that organ, then we can certainly testify to be matter his wife. The Omer Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shmuel, Shachat bo shnayim, o rov shnayim, ubara. So Nebuch, a man was shechted in his two simonim, the Kohen and the Veshet, or most of those two simonim, and at this point, says Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shmuel, we can testify that he's dead and that his wife is allowed to get remarried. Means the principle is Adam shenishchat eino chai. So Gemara asks, Eini, is this really so? Omar of Yehuda Shmuel, shochat bo shnayim, o rov shnayim, v'romas, the Omar, we could add the word le'edim, kisvu get le'ishti, harei elu yichtavu v'yitnu. So we see that an Adam nishchat is considered chai, he's alive. If he was dead, then she's already muteris. We're not going to write again and give it to his wife. He can't divorce his wife after his death. So since Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, holds that the get of a shachut is considered valid, it's dino kechai. So how could he himself say that a shachud is me'idin olav shemes? The answer is chayu v'sofo lamus. There are two dinim here. There's one din of get, and that depends upon whether right now at this moment he's alive, And there's another din of being matir is isha, based on the assumption that sofa lamos, that we wait a certain logical amount of time to pass by, and then we deliver the get. So we ask Elamayata, now that you're saying that through the shechit it's sofa lamos, so as far as Ritzicha is concerned, he should be a full-fledged Ritzicha the moment he shechs two simanim. So therefore, if he shechted someone b'shogeg, then he's a rotzeach. Let's say, for example, he dropped a sakin and somehow it killed his friend. Is Yehi Gola? Al Yoda, he should go into Golas. He's a real rotzeach, b'shogeg, albeit, but he's a rotzeach because we said that he can't survive shechita. Allah, Matanya, why do we learn in the price of Shachat Shnaim Arov Shnaim? Harezena Gola. We're afraid that maybe if he died, he didn't die because of the Shechita, so you didn't kill him. So the Gemara says, Itmar Allah, regarding this brisa of Eino Gola in the case of Shofet, Omar Rav Oshaya. Enochinami, it's sofa lamos, machmas hashchita. You'll ask me why he's not gola. The answer is chayshinon shema ruach bilbalto. Maybe what happened is it's not just the shchita that killed him, but also another element, and that's the tziruf of the ruach. And what's the tzira for the ruach? There are winds blowing, and that causes death, I guess, because it basically disconnected his head, decapitated. Since he didn't die because of the shechita alone, but there was an added element of ruach that participated in causing his death, therefore he doesn't go into goals. But as far as the fact that he will die with or without the ruach as a result of the shechita, eventually die, then we could be mater ishto based on the testimony that he was shechted. He definitely will die. Inami, now the Gemara adds another reason why he doesn't go to Golus. Shema ihu kirev misasa. This is called pirkus, that the body jumps around, and maybe because of his jumping, that's why he died. So the actual death was a result of the pirkus, and the shochet is not going to be gola, because he didn't die al yidei hashchita, but al yidei hapirkus. And the Gemara asks, "My beinayu, what's the difference between if you're worried about the ruach or you're worried about pirkus?" The Gemara is going to give one scenario where there was no pirkus, another scenario where there's no ruach. Number one, shachte bebeisa desheisha. By its sosim, there's no ruach. Upirkes. Jumped around. So again, if the reason why he doesn't go to Golus is because it's a pirkus that causes his death, so in this case, clearly the pirkus caused his death, or was one of the elements of causing his death. Therefore, he doesn't go to Golus. But according to the reasoning that he doesn't go to Golus because of ruach, here it was b'beisei b'sheisha, by sosim, there is no ruach. Inami, another nafkamina, is the shachte b'bava. He shechted him out in the midbar where there's lots and lots of wind, a low pirkets, and the nishchat did not start with his jerking motions. So if the reason why he doesn't go to Golus because of ruach, here there's ruach, he's not going to go into Golus. But if the reason for not going to Golus is because the nishchat himself was makar of his misa through pirkus, but here it's a case where he wasn't a parkes, and therefore, according to everyone, he's potur. I'm sorry. According to the Mandi Omar, who says he's potur from Golus because of ruach, he's potur from Golus. According to Mandi Omar, he's potur from Golus because of the pirkus. Here he wasn't the farkis. So this is where we're going to end Daf Kuf Chaf, and we're up to Daf Kuf Chaf Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, 3 lines down from the top of the